And the treasurer is here today to formally present his proposal. Mr. Rickert?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Executive Committee. As you know, we are all in the midst of dealing with the COVID-19 crisis. There are a lot of issues facing the county, a lot of health issues, and we've had some tremendous work by other elected officials and department heads to address that issue. Okay, here are some of the problems related to property tax collections. Quite obviously, health considerations for staff and our citizens. If we proceed with a collection in the office, there are significant restrictions we will have to have on the free flow of traffic within the office as far as spacing of staff, contact with staff, the interconnection with the information that we transfer. It's going to significantly slow down the process in order to make sure we take reasonable precautions to protect both staff and our taxpayers. Limited mobility for taxpayers. Obviously, right now, we're under a restriction as far as movement for our taxpayers. The City of Aurora currently has a May 15th deadline, which will just be 2 weeks before our first installment property tax due date. So there are some serious reasons why there are problems with property tax collections. Disruptions to the financial markets. A lot of our seniors take their payment for property taxes out of reserve funds that they've set aside with their savings and investments. That's been severely compromised. Cash flow challenges for a lot of our small business community and restaurants and retail. The significant drop in revenue, particularly during the times of year when they're saving up for this obligation, have caused significant issues for our taxpayers also. And obviously, property tax payment option restrictions. A number of our local banks probably will not be collecting property tax. We don't know. We're still conversing with them. It's a wait-and-see attitude. We're not sure what they're going to do. Some will. We've already had some make the decision that they will not be collecting in person. Please bear in mind that Kane County has a significant population of taxpayers that also pay in cash. So once again, that's going to significantly disrupt their ability to obtain cash from financial institutions and then make payment to the county or other banks or other methods. Obviously, we're going to promote heavily our online payment. You can pay with e-check online for free. Credit card is also an option, although we don't encourage that. But also, we're encouraging citizens that aren't as technologically have those technological features at their disposal to simply use the mail. That's probably one of the single best ways to do that. To pay that by mail would be an option. The recommendation we're going to make to the county, and I'm going to give a lot of information on why we're doing this. It's not an ideal recommendation. It's not what I would like to do for taxpayers. It's just simply the reality of the situation we're in and trying to find the best happy median between servicing and providing additional relief for our taxpayers, but also being very cognizant that a number of our taxing districts also pay, fund, and service our first responders that are currently dealing with this crisis. So that weighs heavily on my mind with my recommendation on what we can or are able to do versus what the priority is. And the priority is the health, welfare, and safety of our citizens. Financial matters take a secondary role to that issue. So my recommendation for relief for taxpayers is a waiver of the county's interest penalty for 30 days. It'll give an additional 30 days to taxpayers if they're not able to make the June 1st installment, that they will have 30 days to make that payment without penalty. So our normal statutory interest revenue collection would begin again starting July 2nd. So they will have that extra 30 days. And also we have, let me pull you up a sample. There'll be an advisory notice in with our tax bill specifically detailing exactly what's happening and what the payment option is. It's going to be both in English and in Spanish because we have a large Hispanic population in Kane County. And as you know, earlier we updated our website, so most of that will be available in probably 9 different languages. I think that will cover most of the constituents in Kane County. If we can't, we're certainly ready, willing, and able to provide whatever assistance we need to communicate our directives as far as this goes. We spend a lot of time and effort dealing with other constituents, other county treasurers, crafting just the right mechanism to provide relief for taxpayers and to let you know why we decided to do this as opposed to other efforts. One of the things we're very cognizant of is we do not want to change property tax due dates. Most mortgage escrow and title companies, or I should say all, are required to pay property taxes based on the due date. Those companies have already received that money from our taxpayers. We want to make sure that money is available for our taxing districts on time without delay, which is why we don't want to delay the due date, but provide a relief for the penalty component. We want to have minimal disruption to the collection cycle. All our disbursement dates will remain the same. Nothing will change with our second installment. The only adjustment will be a minor adjustment with the first installment penalty, and that money solely goes to the county anyway. So we don't want to overburden our taxing districts that are already stretched to the limit, providing relief to our first responders. We wanted the cost to be comparatively modest to the county. We'll get into what that cost is in a second, but relatively it's inexpensive compared to other mechanisms. We want assistance that is simple and immediate. We don't want a complicated application process or a review committee or board. We want something that is simple, direct, easy to implement, that people will easily understand when they get their bill and take maximum advantage of the opportunity. And most importantly, we want to avoid, and I think Chairman Lawson has hit on this, we don't want to adopt very drastic measures or encourage other law-setting organizations the opportunity to take very drastic measures with property tax. It's the one steady income stream for taxing districts locally. We want to minimize the impact on that structure because we want to be able to provide, once again, and you're going to hear this a lot in my speech, their ability to assist and provide guidance and services to our first responders to deal with this crisis. Okay, so once again, regularly scheduled due dates, no late penalty for the June installment. Statutory penalties would resume starting July 2nd. And an advisory notice will be included with the tax bill. And to break down real quickly what this involves, here's our normal penalty schedule that would be implemented in a regular tax year. You can see the penalty from June 2nd to July 1st is 1.5%. You can see we're crossing that amount out, and that essentially becomes zero. That's it. It's that simple. It's a simple, easy mechanism and change for our office. We've already contacted our tax providing service, and they said this is something that could be simply implemented into the system. We wanted to be very careful not to implement a change that required significant programming changes by our vendor. This is simple, very direct, something they're very confident they can do without disruption and, most importantly, without delaying the process. Here's a breakdown of the costs. You can look at the different dollar amounts. What we're asking for, we normally get interest penalty for the county as a revenue stream. So we would be foregoing approximately $124,000 next year in interest revenue. I think in light of this crisis, it's a small price for the county to pay to show our taxpayers that we're doing our part to pitch in to help them, to make things a little bit easier for them. And we're shouldering the majority of this burden. We're not trying to overly burden other taxing districts. We're showing the leadership, initiative, and ingenuity to provide that relief ourselves without hurting them. Again, I want to talk, and I can't stress enough, impact on taxing districts. We have to remember that these are the people that provide our police, fire protection, and in the case of Kane County, which is also a taxing district, the health department and emergency services. So there'll be no second installment modification, no modification to the distribution schedule. The day that they get paid their money is still the same day, irregardless. Even with this foregoance of the penalty with the first installment, they're still guaranteed to get 51% of their money because of prepayment and the mortgage and escrow accounts, like I stated earlier. By not changing the due date, that money still comes in on time. And like I said, starting July 2nd, collection resumes as normal. And ultimately, taxing districts will get all the money that they're due. There will be a slight delay with the first installment because of this waiver, and we'll have a better example of what that would be on the next slide. You have the bars there. You can see our collection rate for Kane County is very high, and once we complete our tax sale in October, virtually 100% of all funds is collected and distributed to the taxing districts. If you notice the adjustment we're asking for, the green line All the way to the left at 72% is what we would normally collect by the end of May, and by the end of June, we're at 97%. By adopting this resolution, worst case scenario, the taxing districts would get that 51% by the end of May, and by the end of June, they would be back up to 97% like they would in a normal year. Realistically, not every taxpayer would take advantage of this. Surprisingly, a lot of taxpayers actually pay their bills on time, and when they see a due date, we'll pay based on that. We're really centrally focused on the fact that we want to provide relief to people that simply can't, because of cash flow issues, to provide that extra measure of 30 days to make that obligation. Realistically, and we have no precedent to base this on, we're really in uncharted waters with who will pay and who will not pay, but if you take the middle split between what the extreme worst case scenario would be versus a normal collection, that comes out to about 61%. So 61% in the first month, and then right back up to normal on the second month, and then going forward. There are 4 options. This is not my decision. I've made my recommendation. Ultimately, the decision is the county board's. We have 4 options. One, number A, is no change. Leave it the same. The impact on that, it's going to make things very difficult for our taxpayers if you choose to do nothing. Like I said, I don't recommend that. Option B is 1 month. There's minimal disruption to taxing districts. We're out about $124,000 in lost interest revenue for next year, but we provide a 30-day benefit to all our taxpayers in Kane County without application, without complicated procedures to collect it, without significant changes or disruption to our system. You have a 60-day option, which would cost us about $243,000. The important thing is there you start interfering and disrupting the ability of taxing districts to provide aid and assistance to their first responders during this crisis. At 90 days, you would cause significant disruptions to many of the taxing districts, particularly our school districts, who are already under extreme pressure providing services for our youth and meeting their other obligations. This would be extremely difficult to proceed forward with their school districts. I've had a number of conversations with a lot of taxing districts. I haven't had any pushback on option B, which is the 30 days. They realize that it'll take some juggling of their books. They realize that it'll make things a little bit tight for them, but I haven't had any significant resistance, at least nobody that's contacted or talked to me about this issue. Option B says, yeah, that's going to make things a little tight for us, but we think we can do that. There is one other issue I want to direct, because this has been addressed by several board members on setting up an application procedure and allowing people to provide an application to the county and request relief, and then have a review committee look at that and determine whether or not they want to do that. Let me address why I do not favor an application process. One, it requires an application form with questions that has to be reviewed, produced, and approved by the county board. Two, it's going to delay help to taxpayers. It kind of defeats the whole point and purpose of what we're trying to do here. Three, there would be an administrative cost also to setting up a review committee. The board would have to appoint an administrative council or panel to oversee that. You would have to establish rules of procedures. You would also have to establish an appeal process. So if somebody was turned down by the appeal committee, there has to be an appeal process for them. And probably a significant thing we have to focus on is our potential liability if we fail to properly deal with protected classes of taxpayers, or there's a disproportionate awarding of applications based on that. That's a whole litany of concern I would have, and generates a whole group of legal questions that would probably have to be addressed by our state's attorney. And again, we have limited time. We want this simple and easy. We want something that's going to provide relief without overburdening our taxpayers. And lastly, not that this really matters, but I really wouldn't recommend it, and that's my position on an application procedure. That completes my presentation. If there are any questions, if you choose option B that I recommended, there will have to be an amendment made to the current proposal before you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Rickert.
Thank you.